Very, very good morning to all of you. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to the class today. And today we'll be revising the topic residential status. I am C. Ridhima Bhatia and we'll be shortly beginning. I hope everyone is ready with their revision. And so the first part of the class would be about revision. And as the drill goes, around 9 o'clock, we'll give you rights to interact with us, and we'll take up your queries personally also. So I hope everyone is well awakened so that we can start the class today. Yes, you can join through the Zoom link. Ajit or anyone can please help the students who are putting in the query box how to join through the Zoom app.
Ma'am, Zoom link is running in front of the students. YouTube
Okay.
live.
Okay, so the Zoom link is there in the you on the YouTube, right?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes. So I hope everyone can find it from there. Gayatri, very good morning. So let's begin. So residential status, why it is very important to determine the residential status. Guys, one more thing. This is a revision class. If you find the pace is bit fast and we'll be covering the important topics or the important things. So if you find the pace is bit fast, please let me know, okay? So on to the residential status, residential and scope of total income. See, income tax, what we do, income tax may we determine the total income, right? But the first step in determining the total income is determining the residential status. Without correctly determining the residential status, you cannot correctly determine the total income. And why it is important? Because most of the country have a concept of taxing, has a concept of taxing the income based on the residential status. The residential status criteria for each of the country can be different. We'll be focusing as per the residential status in India. So I hope the screen is visible. So residential before long understanding the criteria for residential status, basically when you're understanding the criteria of residential status, you can hear it's given in two categories. I will say it divided into four best. One is residential status for individual, one is for HUF, one is for companies, and one is for others. Basically, these are the more four major category on for which you determine or the criteria for which are different. Otherwise, others में कौन से आ जाएंगे? Firm, AOP, local authority, all of these would come under others. Residential status would influence the total income of the city. How? Because it will tell how much of an income can be taxed in India or what source of the income can be taxed in India. Because always on taxation part, there are two rights. One is the source right, one is the resident right. So when you're using the resources of an economy, you have been there and earning income through the policies of that economy, you are a resident. So basically, you have to pay tax here. And one is source from where you're earning. So both have a conflict all the time, when which you will eventually learn that how such conflicts are resolved. But at your stage, you have to understand that how do you determine residential status? Based on the residential status, what are the scope of income? And specifically section 9, which is income deemed to accrue in India. This chapter is extremely important. And let me tell you one thing, the depth of this chapter is in fact a lot more when you go to the final level. So what better than having a strong base? While determining residential status, always remember that it has to be determined for every person. ऐसा नहीं है, you cannot say that if the husband's residential status has been determined, we do not have to determine wife's status. No, it has to be determined for every person, every year, for I say here, one residential status for all type of income So why I'm writing this? Because last time one of the student asked, ma'am, suppose for capital gain income I'm a resident and for salary income I'm a non-resident, it can happen? No. For the entire year, you would hold one residential status, except in very extreme cases which are not at relevant at your level. Second, you have to determine for the entire previous year your residential status. Third, it is there for all type of income. Fourth, mostly if you talk to me about individual HUF company and others, the most complex at your level is for individuals. If you understand the residential status of individual, HUF companies and others are like a cakewalk. If you'll ask about me for the individual residential status, honestly, guys, a couple of years back, it was also pretty easy. It was also pretty easy, but since the global trades are opening, since people are operating at a global level without visiting much in India, I can say individual residential status can be determined majorly based on physical stay, citizenship, and Indian source income. Earlier, it was not that Indian source income was of much relevance, but now it is. So you have to keep in mind these checkpoints while determining the residential status of individual. When you determine a residential status of individual, you look for the answer is whether an individual is resident in India or is a non-resident in India. Please don't write non-resident Indian. That is NRI. Please, when you are determining the residential status, you have to say that this person is resident in India for this year, or this person is non-resident in India for this year. When you're making a computation of total income, you are writing A's total income computation for so and so year, write residential status as resident, non-resident, etc. Because it's the first step in determining the computation of total income. Generally, this is the answer. But when we talk about individual HUF, the answer for residential status goes to an extent of resident and ordinarily resident, which we commonly call as ROR, and resident but not ordinarily resident, which we commonly call as RNOR. Try to avoid writing short forms in your exam and try to write it in detailed as ROR and RNOR. Please, in no situation, leave your answer for individual and HUF as resident in India. It would be completely wrong. Completely wrong in the sense means you will not get full marks. Please make sure that you write it as ROR, or RNOR, that is resident and ordinarily resident. He's a resident also and he's an ordinarily resident. And second is resident, but he's not an ordinarily resident. Priyanka, please park this question for later discussion. Right now, I'll be quickly giving you a brief about residential status for individual. Okay. We have your Saransh also open here for DT. It will help you understand it fast. Short form, try to avoid writing ROR and RNORs. Write as at resident, but not ordinarily resident, and resident and ordinary resident. Okay. So now we're talking about residential status of individual. First of all, I'm trying to give you a brief note while we discuss as a flowchart. There is in your Saransh of DT, there is a good flowchart there also. So we'll be discussing it, and you can take a screenshot or you can make it yourself. Okay. So now, before I discuss about the residential status of individual, generally it was determined based on the physical stay in India. Physical stay in India. Ma'am, physical stay matlab how many days you are in India? Based on that, residential status was determined for individual. The purpose of the stay is immaterial. आप इंडिया में क्या करने आए हो, it is not important. What you're doing in India, whether you're having a vacation in India, whether you're studying in India, whether you were actually working in India, whether you were born in India, purpose of stay does not impact my residential status. Also, when you will see how many days you have to determine the residential status of individual, you have to remember that the days or the stay need not be continuous. If I'm talking about stay as per 182 days, which you'll see, it is not mandatory that it should be a continuous stay. You can come, you can go, you can come, and you can go. Secondly, it's also not that it should be regular, because when we talk about previous years, 4 years or 7 years, we do not expect that it should be regular, that every person should be there at a regular interval. If you are fulfilling the criteria in 1 year itself, you are a resident. 1 second. Okay. So, and remember, burden of proof is always on SSC. Burden of proof, ma'am, at your level, it may not be important, but suppose the income tax officer asks you that whether you are a resident or not, you say that I am a non-resident. Now, he says, no, as per our records, you're a resident. Then you have to prove that why you're a non-resident. And how do we check physical stay in India? हमें कैसे पता चलेगा? How will we get to know? So basically, when you visit any country or when you go abroad, there is a passport on which our passport on which there are stamps of date of arrivals and date of departure. Based on that, you can get to know when the person was in India and when the person was not in India. Okay, so now let's start with the criteria. The first basic criteria, the first step is always to determine whether the person is resident or not. If he's a non-resident, the quest ends here. The question ends here for you. But if he's a resident, then you have to determine whether he's in ROR or RNOR. So the general rule, first step is for the general rule, which is resident. First, you will determine whether he's a resident, then only you will go whether he's a ROR or RNOR. If he's a non-resident, again, I'm saying the answer would end here. So the general rule, friends, it is sorry for bad handwriting. A person should be in India for 182 days or more. Simple. A lot of time question is asked, ma'am, more in the previous year, we have to see the status in the previous year or we have to see for the assessment year. Guys, for the previous year, you have to see the physical stay. How many days he was in India for in the previous year? Assessment year, may if his status is changing, does not matter. That would be the next previous year for which we'll say. Okay, so 182 days or more in India. If yes, then he's a resident. If no, then we have another condition to see, which is 60 days in the relevant previous year and 365 days or more in preceding 4 years. Preceding 4 years. I'm preceding 4 years. So if I'm determined, so this is first of all, when you are reading an act, remember, and or has to be very carefully read. Or means either this or this, and means both of the conditions combined. So in this case, if I'm not staying in India for 182 days, whether I'm staying in India for 60 days, at least 60 days, if the answer is yes, then you have to check whether I'm in India for in the preceding 4 years for accumulation of 365 days or not. If yes, then I am a resident. If both the conditions are not performed, I am a non-resident. If one of the condition is performed, I'm a resident. First, you will always check by default 182 days rule. Then you will go to this rule. So for this previous year, you have to check in the previous year, 23-24, he's in India for 60 days. And for the previous year, 19-20 to previous year, 22-23, in total was in India for 365 days or more. I hope you understand that this you have to be checked in total. That means it can happen in 1920, he has fulfilled this criteria, or 1920, 2021, and then in 21, 22, or 22, 23, he was not in India. Does not matter. Remember, I told you regularity is not an important criteria. Total में 365 days you're here, done. Okay? So this was a general rule for people. Uske baad certain exceptions were added based on citizenship and Indian source income, which we'll study now. यहाँ तक anyone has any doubt? Thank you, Vagish. Preeti, what is your doubt here? Yes, I think interactively we can ask later only, but if you want to type in, you can type it in the chat box. No, Priya, chat like this, very good question. Try to avoid putting chat like this. Try to be as subjective as possible. So Raj is asking for second part. See, Raj, either you have to see 182 days or more up India mein hai or not. That is, if suppose in the previous year, 23, 24, I am in India for 80 days. So you say, ma'am, I am not following to be a resident because I am in India for less than 182 days. But now suppose I'll go to the second condition to check the residency status, which is 60 days in the current previous year. That means in the previous year 23, 24, at least you should be in India for 60 days. Agar 60 days se bhi come in, definitely you are a non-resident. But if you're in India for at least 60 days, then one box tick. But along with that 60 days condition, you have to see whether in the 4 preceding years you were in India for 365 days or more in total. If yes, then both combined would be your, if both conditions are fulfilled, then you would be a resident, except one. तो शायद सिंपल है, और मीन्स दैट ईदर या तो ये वाला कंडीशन, either this condition or this condition. Yes, Vajanya, you have to use the word previous year as much as possible. See, when we talk about TDS now, then we use the word financial year. Otherwise, it's always relevant previous year or current previous year. Try to write it very carefully, okay? So, Tushar, again, either I'll see this. If this is not happening, then I have to see the second condition, which is this. And second condition, I have to fulfill both this criteria, 60 days and preceding 4 years, wala 365 days. Okay. Now there are certain exceptions. Exception means that this criteria is a little bit twerked, a little bit changed to see the residential status. First exception, friends, is exception का मतलब होता है different from the general criteria. First exception is when we talk about Indian citizen or person of Indian origin. Indian citizen or person of Indian origin. दोनों में फर्क क्या है? What is the difference between both of them? Indian citizen is when you're an Indian passport holder. Person of Indian origin means that you might be a citizen of other country, but either your parents or grandparents, were born in the undivided India, So you are a person of Indian origin. That means आपके जो origins हैं, आपका जो root है, your roots or your religions were from India. That's why you're a person of Indian origin. Either of them. When your parents or grandparents were born in undivided India, or you are an Indian citizen, whichever condition you're fulfilling. Okay? Based on that, if you come to visits in India, comes to visits in India, or comes on visits in India. Visit can be for any purpose. See, guys, stay is different and visit is different. In a way, visit is a more short-term thing. Ma'am, what does this condition mean? That means you were staying abroad And now you're coming for small visits, maybe for some holiday, maybe to meet your family, maybe you come as a regular person. You're settled abroad. You have an example, take it in your mind that suppose there is Mr. Roy who shifted outside India almost 20 years back. He settled there, but he has a home in India. And generally, people do, right? They come to India and stay for 2 months or 3 months in a year when maybe weather conditions are very cold there or something like that. Yeah, so this type of person we're talking about here, who is an Indian citizen or is a person of Indian origin and comes on visits to India. He's permanently otherwise staying abroad, but is coming on visits to India. Maybe to check his properties, maybe to sell certain things based on that. ठीक है? So come down visits to India. तब हम रेजिडेंसी स्टेटस विल चेक based on either of the criteria. Either his Indian sourced income is less than 15 lakhs or up to 15 lakhs, or here if it is more than 15 lakhs. So if a question comes to you, how will you start? This is how you will start. First step is you will check whether that person is Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin. If the answer is yes, second you will check what is he doing, whether he's coming on visits to India. The answer is yes. Third, you will check what is his Indian income. Whether it is more than 15 lakhs or less than 15 lakhs. Ma'am, Indian income, see, generally the act says the source of income is in India or the source of income is not outside India. Basically, any income which is accruing in India, that we are talking about. Okay. So, three things first you have to ask, three questions you have to ask to determine the residential status. First, if the question clearly says that it is an Indian citizen, you have to be very chaukanna, you have to be very alert that, oh, this can be a exception case. Okay. Second, you will see whether that person is coming to visits in India or not. Third, you will see in question what is his Indian source income. Once you've determined these three things, then now you will determine the residential status based on the criteria I'm writing. So if the Indian source income is less than 15 lakhs, then it is very simple. The person would be resident if he's in India for 182 days or more. If he's in India for 182 days or more. Simple. Okay. Then if the answer comes as no, the income is more than 15 lakhs. Suppose he's earning rent from a house for almost 20 lakhs per annum. So that means his Indian source income for that particular previous year is more than 15 lakhs. Then his residential status has to be determined based on two criteria. Either wala criteria. He should be in India for 182 days or more, which is the basic criteria. If he is not in India for 182 days or more, but he stays in India at least 120 days in previous year and 365 days or more in 4 preceding years. So can I say when a person who's an Indian citizen comes on visit to India and has Indian income more than 15 lakhs, then instead of this criteria, which 60 days it is written, it would be replaced by 120 days, and we have to see how is it becoming a resident. If he's becoming resident as per 182 days or more criteria, fine. If he's not becoming resident as per 182 days criteria, then you will see at least he was in India for 120 days. The answer is no. Then he's a non-resident. इस केस में 60 days वाला criteria you will not see. This is why this is an exception. Or here you will not even see the 60 days criteria at all. Here only one criteria you have to see whether the person is resident or not. 182 days से ज़्यादा है, yes. 182 days or more, yes, he's a resident. Less than 182 days, he's a non-resident. You will not see the second criteria. Two criteria, which is you have to see only when his income is more than 15 lakhs. Then you have to see whether 182 days. If the answer is no, then you have to see 120 and 365. First exception clear? Acha, so person were asking what is person of Indian origin? Yes, when your parents or grandparents were born in undivided India ka map, if you will see, that includes Pakistan, a part of Bangladesh and everything. So if your parents were born in that particular part, so if suppose my grandparent is born in Lahore is in part of undivided India, then I am a person of Indian origin, even if I'm a Canadian citizen, even if I'm a Singapore citizen, I am a person of Indian origin because my parents were or grandparents were born in Pakistan, which is presently Pakistan, but was a part of undivided India. So yes, you can safely say the entire first, second generation of Pakistan is person of Indian origin or Bangladesh as such. Okay? So undivided India का map देख लेना, you'll get to know. Komal, Ashutosh, is your doubt clear? Yeah, Gayatri, if the income is more than 15 lakhs, then you have to see whether it is 182 days or what. Nahi hai, then you'll go to the second criteria, 120 days and 365 days. 120 days in the current previous year, 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years. So basic guy, basic students, make sure that you don't write just the technique, a word as Indian income. Try to write what your act and book says, which is if it's total income other than foreign source income, which ultimately means Indian income, but you will write total income other than foreign source income in exam. अभी समझने के लिए I'm using the word Indian source income. ठीक है? Just 1 second. Let me check if there is any other problem. Preeti, this is not the case. If suppose I want to shift now to Canada permanently, so till that time I get a citizenship of Canada, I would be an Indian citizen for at least 5 years. So it's okay. So once I've shifted Canada permanently and I'm coming on visits to India, then this criteria I have to see. So if any Indian citizen, again, students, this is a checkpoint which I made you write. Question will not tell you directly that you have to find it through exception. You have to be alert. Oh, the question says Indian citizen. Oh, the person is coming on visits to India. He is otherwise staying abroad. Oh, he has income less than 15 lakhs or more than 15 lakhs. If less than 15 lakhs, then only 182 days criteria has to be seen. If more than 15 lakhs, then you have to see either of the criteria. जैसे general rule के according you were seeing either of the criteria. Here also, you have to see either of the criteria, 182 days or more. If that is not done, then 120 days or 365 and 365 days. Please, Preeti and everyone, focus on the general concept. Question me, you will be given. Either it would be given that his person of Indian origin, or it would be given that his parents or grandparents were born in a particular part of India or undivided India. So that you can be clear. Priya, Abhi, I haven't gone to crew members. So I have done it. Please focus. Gayatri, Soumya, why are you rushing, guys? Abhi, I'm just discussing whether the person is resident or not, and I'm discussing the exceptions to it. I have not moved on to RNOR or ROR. ठीक है ऐसे क्या होगा? You will feel that my question is answered when at the places we have not done the topic itself. Okay? Aditya, is it out clear? Yes, Sunil, 365 days is the total of the four previous year. Suppose you can be in India for 100 days in 1920, then every year, you're 100 days here in India. That is what we are seeing on. Again, somewhere for you, I'm repeating, if it is more than 15 lakhs, if the Indian source income is more than 15 lakhs for an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin who's coming on visits to India, then you have to see either of the criteria. First is 182 days or more. If that is no, suppose the person is in India for 140 days, then you have to see the second criteria, which is at least 120 days in previous year and 365 days in the four preceding year. If the exception would not have been here, then you would have applied 182 days and 60 days plus 365 days wala. 182 days or 60 days plus 365 days wala criteria. But since this is an exception, then you will check it like that. Second exception, guys, and everyone, please focus. Focus on the second exception, which is only for Indian citizen. This exception is not for a person of Indian origin. This is only for Indian citizen. The condition is whether the person is Indian citizen. Yes. Now you have to see the question whether he is a member of crew or whether he has left left India during the previous year for employment purpose outside India. So guys, one more thing, very important thing, which means when a person, you have to check the physical state, then the day of departure and the day of arrival has to be seen as it was in India. Ma'am, what do you mean? So suppose I'm telling you that the person left India on 18th of April and he came back on 19th of March 24. So while calculating the physical stay, you will calculate from 1st April to 18th. 18th April also has to be considered to be in India. Even if he's leaving India early morning, still it would be considered to be in India. Similarly, 19th March also would be considered to be in India. Even if he's leaving, even if he has came on 19th March late night, still it would be considered to be in India. And I told you, you have to see that stamp which is there on your passports. Okay, so 19th March to 31st March would be considered to be in India. Coming back to the second exception, here you have to see the exception is for an Indian citizen who is either a member of crew or has left India during the previous year for employment purpose outside India. Member of crew means it's an Indian born shipper. He's a crew member, and mostly these people are outside India only because they're traveling a lot. So they are given certain relaxation. And second is for a person who left during the previous year from India for employment purpose. Ma'am, matlab, a lot of people move during the previous year for good or for shifting their economic base outside India. Employment outside India means whether I'm leaving India for settling a business outside India, whether I'm leaving India for starting a new job outside India, then I'm covered under the second exception. Then only I'm covered under second exception. If I'm leaving India during the previous year May, during the previous year for employment outside India, then only the second exception would be applicable. If I'm leaving India for medical purpose, second exception not applicable, then you have to see as per the general rule. If I'm leaving India for study purpose, second exception not applicable, you have to see as per the general rule. But if I'm leaving India when I'm shifting my earning base from outside to outside India, then second exception has to be seen. This is a very, very point and a lot of, I'll say a lot of case laws, case studies are basically on this problem because there's a lot of confusion in determining the residency status. Again, I'm saying for everyone, please be attentive. Second exception would only be applicable if an Indian citizen leaves India for good during the previous year and is shifting his employment outside India. If I have left India for good in say in the preceding years, that then this condition is not applicable. You have to leave India during that year itself for the employment purpose. So, ma'am, if I've left India 5 years back, then which condition which be applicable? Then this condition, the general rule would be applicable until and unless you're making visits to India. Okay? So, ma'am, what is the rule here you have to see? For them, there is only one criteria. That is, the person should be in India for 182 days or more during the previous year. If not, he is not a resident. That is, he is a non-resident. If yes, he would be a resident. Simple. यहाँ पे income criteria देखना ही नहीं. You don't have to see the income criteria. Santhan, I already answered this question of yours twice. Please pay attention because otherwise all students would feel irritated that why the same thing is being repeated. 4 years, the criteria has to be 365 days, okay, in the preceding 4 years, and it can be in one single year altogether. It can be in 4 years, thoda thoda. It does not matter. The regularity does not matter. Satya, if an income is less than 15 lakhs, but if it's not an exceptional case, then you have to check both the conditions. See, all again and again, I'm writing it in points so that you know these exceptions are only applicable when certain criteria are there. General rule is this. But if a question is of Indian citizen, you have to be very much alert. If it's a question of not an Indian citizen, suppose the question is on Bradley, you just have to see as per the general rule because we are not talking about the exceptions here. If a question is for a person who is staying in India for since birth and who just goes on vacation outside India, then he's not covered under any of the exception because first exception says that you're permanently staying outside India and you're coming on visits to India. Okay? And that too, you are an Indian citizen or person of Indian origin. Second exception says that you are an Indian citizen, but now you're moving India for good. For good means that you are shifting your economic base or your employment base from India to outside India. Then that second exception comes. Now, suppose I'm an Indian citizen, I go to study abroad. I'm not covered under any exception, then I have to see my residency status as per the general rule. I have to be covered under the exceptions to be following those conditions of exception. That's why I have written first question you have to ask this, second question you have to ask this, third question you have to ask this, and then you have to determine the residency status. Again, students, leaving India during previous year for employment purpose means that previous year में ही, I'm saying it in Hindi for everyone for once, then I'll repeat it again. Previous year में ही आप इंडिया छोड़ के गए क्योंकि आपको बाहर या तो काम मिला एज अ जॉब या यू आर स्टार्टिंग यू वांट टू सेट अप एन बिजनेस आउटसाइड इंडिया. अगर प्रीवियस ईयर में आप छोड़ के गए तब यू विल बी कवर्ड अंडर सेकंड एक्सेप्शन. आप 10 साल पहले छोड़ के चले गए, यू आर नॉट कवर्ड अंडर सेकंड एक्सेप्शन बिकॉज the exception says you have to leave India during the previous year. All the words which are written here are very critical to understand, and you have to understand them from that critic point of view. Okay? Because Anup, you are shifting your economic interest, and economic interest when you will study from the global taxation perspective is very important. So if you're shifting your economic interest outside India, so government gives a relaxation. ठीक है. If you are earning, if you are in India for 182 days, that is for a substantial period, then only we will consider you a resident. Otherwise, we will not consider you a resident. So Janya, is it clear? somewhere 15 lakhs. Well, part is clear. Krishna, 150 lakh, nahi 15 lakh. If the Indian income, Indian sourced income is 15 lakhs or more than 15 lakhs, sorry. Again, I'm saying these are the checkpoints which you have to see. If you will not see, you might make a wrong answer or you might write a wrong residential status. Different criteria you will pick, which is not to be done. Okay. And the third exception is a newly introduced concept, which is deemed resident. Which is deemed resident. And what do you mean by deemed resident? See, deemed resident means when deemed ka kya matlab hota hai? Deemed means when you will be assumed to be. When you will assume to be. Otherwise, you're not. You are in general not, but now in this case, you will assumed to be a resident. Iske liye there are three things you have to remember. The person is an Indian citizen. Person of Indian origin nahi hai yahan pe. Here, there is no person of Indian origin. A person is Indian citizen having Indian sourced income of more than 15 lakhs. Indian source income for more than 15 lakhs and is not becoming a resident of any other country. Not becoming or not liable to tax, I should say, in any other country due to the domiciles or tax laws, whatever, then if he's not paying tax on his income in any other country specifically, then he would be considered as deemed resident. Students, let me tell you very honestly, people very, very technically plan their travels so that they can see whether whether they would be the resident for that particular year or not. It's not that people just plan random travels. No, everyone wants to become a non-resident if they're earning global incomes. Why? Because once you become a resident or in ROR, your entire global income is taxed, irrespective of from wherever you're earning. So people technically want that they should become a non-resident if a lot of travels are involved, so that unnecessarily they don't have to pay tax on the entire income in India. So that's why, and people were doing like this. People were traveling in a very smart manner that they were not getting covered under any of the criteria, and then they were also not covered under any of the criteria of any of the country, and they were evading a lot of taxes or what manipulating a lot of states so that they can reduce their tax liability. Isliye government said once and for all, okay, you are an Indian citizen, you are having such a substantial income from India, which is 15 lakhs and more than 15 lakhs, and you're not liable to tax in any other country because of your domicile or tax laws, etc., then by default, we will not see physical stay. We will not see physical stay. By default, you will become a deemed resident. So, can I say you one thing here? That when a question of Indian citizen comes, he's not coming on visit to India. He has not left on India. He has not left India for employment purpose. Think one more time whether he's a person who's taxable in any other country or not. If not, he would be deemed to be a resident if his Indian source income is more than 15 lakhs. Okay, so whenever a question comes for Indian citizen, be triple alert and see which exception is coming, because definitely he would be falling under one of these exception, and you have to determine the criteria accordingly. So here we conclude how to determine resident or non-resident. Now forward, we will see how to determine resident and ordinarily resident and resident but not ordinarily resident. But take a moment. You want to take screenshot, please take screenshot. You want to draw, please draw. Take 1 minute and absorb it, because we already, I know, dedicated a lot of time and we went quite slowly, but don't worry. And someone asked me, ma'am, Companies Act में तो कुछ resident status का कुछ लिखा है. Guys, one more thing. We are talking about residential status as per the income tax to determine the income. There is residential status under FEMA also. where we have to determine your status as resident as per the FEMA laws for the FEMA purpose. So please do not get confused what has to be followed and what not has to be followed. Yes, Swati, that person would also be covered. Iqbali, we'll cover the resident and ordinary resident part, then we'll do certain questions. यहाँ तक anyone has any doubt? Okay, perfect. Determine citizenship नहीं question में Priyanka, it would be given that the person is Indian citizen or not. Passport holders Indian citizen होते हैं. Indian passport holders. You don't have to determine the citizenship. Now, once the person is resident by either general rule or exception, then you have to see whether he's in ROR or RNOR. Do not end your answer by, oh, the person is resident in India. No. Even if the question says determine the residency status, whether the person is resident in India or not, please fulfill your answer completely. Now, for ROR, RNOR, simple criteria say whether the person would be ROR or RNOR, which is if a person becomes resident, you have to see whether he's in ROR or RNOR. Two criteria have to be fulfilled. Both the conditions have to be fulfilled, and means both conditions. Both the conditions have to be fulfilled. First is he should be in India for 730 days or more. 730 days or more. During this 7 immediately preceding previous years. If he's not in India for 730 days or more in the 7 preceding previous year, finish your thing here. Do not go to second condition. Why? Because you have to see both the conditions should be fulfilled. If one is not fulfilled, then your answer should be like, oh, okay, he's in RNOR. Oh, why see people wasting time? Acha, ma'am, 730 days condition is not fulfilled. Let's go to the second condition. Why to go to the second condition when first is not fulfilled? Second condition is he should be at least a resident in India in 2 out of 10 immediately preceding previous year. 2 out of 10 immediately preceding previous year. Again, we are talking about in both the cases for the immediately preceding previous year. We're determining the residential for previous year 23-24, but here your days has to be checked for 7 years preceding the previous year, which are, as you can see on the screen, in 7 years में total 730 days or more. So I'll not say average 100 days का लेना है या 110 नहीं. Even if he's in India for these 2 years, 365 days completely, he's fulfilling the criteria, guys. So again, no continuity required, no condition required that has to be in India in all the years. No. 730 days or more during the 7 immediately preceding previous year. Yes. Then check whether he was a resident in India in the 7 preceding previous year. That means if the answer comes as yes, then he's a resident and ordinary resident. Otherwise, he's a resident but not ordinary resident. Got it? But very importantly, remember, a person who becomes resident, either as per the deemed resident criteria, or as per the 120 days criteria. As per this criteria, which I've written in yellow. These people, if have become resident in India, would always be in RNOR, would always be a resident but not ordinary resident. So if an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin who comes to visit to India and has income more than 15 lakhs and is becoming Indian source income of more than 15 lakhs and is becoming resident as per the 120 days in the previous year and 365 days in the 4 preceding years wala criteria, then by default, this person would always be resident but not ordinary resident. Also, a deemed resident would always be a resident but not ordinarily resident. For others, you have to see those two conditions. But for them, they are by default resident. They would become resident but not ordinary resident. But if a person is becoming in this exception or resident as per 182 days criteria, then you have to see both the things. Then you have to see both the criteria for ROI and RNOR. This is a very technical point I'm repeating again. So to check the residential status of a person during the previous year, first step is you have to determine the resident, whether he's a resident or not. If he becomes resident, as per the conditions which we saw, then you have to determine whether the person is in ROR or RNOR, which would depend upon two conditions to be fulfilled together, which is 730 days or more during the preceding immediately preceding 7 years, 7 previous years, or he should be in India for at least 2 out of 10 immediately preceding years. He should be a resident of India at least 2 out of 10 immediately preceding previous year. If both the conditions are fulfilled, then only he's a resident and ordinary resident. If one of the condition is fulfilled, he would be an RNOR. Okay, do not waste your time to check on the second condition and first is not fulfilled. First is not fulfilled, he's in RNOR. But by default, a deemed resident and a person who's becoming resident through that 120 days criteria would always be an RNOR. Got it? Rohit, yes, in the last 10 preceding previous years में से कोई भी 2 years में the person is becoming resident. So if you will determine your residential status by such calmness and by one and one thing, by checking the conditions, I can assure you your residential status question can never ever go wrong. But if you'll be in a rush, just quickly coming on to the days, then you will make a blunder. Anirudh, again, I'm saying any one condition not satisfied for ROR, even RNOR. Rahul Sharma. If a person of Indian origin is there, he's an Indian citizen, and it's written he comes on a frequent visits to India, or comes for a visits to India, or visited India for a so and so purpose, then you have to see whether his income is more than 15 lakhs or not. If more than 15 lakhs, then you will see whether he's becoming resident as per 182 days criteria. If not, then 120 days or 365 days wala criteria. All these conditions somewhere are covered under module one by one. They're also covered under your flowchart given in Saransh, okay? Anu, see, why they are calling a deemed resident as an RNOR? Because ICAI, they have created that person as an RNOR, zabardast, in the sense you have to pay tax in India as a resident. Secondly, we can see when we are making someone as an ROR, we fall them to taxes for a lot of income, that is even for their entire income, which is not justified. Continuous stay nahi, you have to be a resident in 2 years. Resident means कि उस year में either you have to be for 182 days and then 60 days. That means, okay? Bhumika, where is the doubt? So the conditions are simple. You have to be in India. Once you're a resident, then you have to check whether you're an RNOR or ROR. Now, to check whether you're an ROR or RNOR, you have to check two conditions, and both the conditions have to be fulfilled. That is, the person should be in India for at least 730 days, in the preceding immediately 7 previous years, or sorry, if this is done, then you will move to the second step, which is whether he's in India, he's a resident in India. Resident in India in any of the two 2 years from the 10 immediately preceding previous year. And I have written the years here. So now, suppose the person stays in India, यहाँ पे 182 days, 190 days, 130 days, 185 days, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 means he was not in India for these days. Now you will see whether he was in India for 730 days in the 7 preceding years. 7 preceding years goes from here till here. You have to see, calculate whether he was in India for 730 days or no. The answer is no. Then you will not go to the second condition. Now suppose यहाँ पे I write now I will check whether he was in India for what period. He is in India for 937 days in the 7 preceding year. Yes. Now see the second condition. Second condition says 2 out of 10 immediately preceding years he should be a resident. So he's a resident in this year. He's a resident in this year. He's a resident in this year. He's a ROR for me. Simple. अब इसको और कॉम्प्लेक्स मत बनाना कि मैम उसमें एक्सेप्शंस देखना ही नहीं. Simple at your level, simple such type of question will come. Do not make it complex with your imagination. Okay. So now, based on this, someone asked me, ma'am, crew member ka, please explain the signing of certificate wala cheez. Okay. So generally, as students, I told you that when a person leaves India, that is the date of his departure and the date of his arrival when he comes to India, both this thing has to be considered as physical stay in India. Both the days have to be considered as physical stay in India. But when I talk about crew member mein, we have to be very careful. See, when a person charges his duty uh, as a crew member, he has to sign a certificate, which is continuous discharge certificate, where he says that today I have started my voyage. Today I have started my voyage. And when he finishes his voyage, that is his tour, when he finishes that voyage, then he has to sign off that certificate that today I have ended my voyage. Both the dates of signing and signing off are not to be included as physical stay in India, are not to be included as physical stay in India. This is only for the people who are a crew member, and us case में the CDC dates would be signed. Both the period from which when the days from the date when he starts and from the date when he ends, both have to be excluded. Both have to be excluded for physical stay in India. Clear? Now, based on this illustration one, you will practice. I'll do another illustration with you where we can check about the residential status for Bretley. So Bretley is an Australian cricketer, not an Indian citizen. I have to just follow that basic criteria. Okay? Player visits India for 100 days every financial year. Just because it's written visits India, you will not go to the exception. Remember, first question, second question, third question. Okay, so the person visits India for 100 days in every financial year. This has been his practice for last 10 financial years. So he is in India for 100 days every financial year. Find out his residential status. What would your answer change if others relates to Srinath, an Indian citizen who resides in Australia and represent the Australian cricket team? Okay. Okay, let's go by one. This question will, I hope, make all your doubts clear if there are any. First of all, read the question, try to practice, take 1 minute. So Rohit has quickly said, ma'am, the person is RNOR. Okay. Bretley is RNOR. Yes. How? So Bretley is fulfilling. What are the criteria? 182 days or more in the previous year? No, not fulfilling. But he's fulfilling 60 days wala criteria in the previous year because he's in India for 100 days. Plus, he's fulfilling 365 days also together in 4 preceding years wala criteria because he's in India for 400 days in the preceding 4 years because every year he's coming for 100 days. So he's becoming resident as per the second criteria. Very fine. Now, whether he's in RNOR, now since he's in ROR or RNOR, we have to see since he has been in India for 100 days each, that makes 700 days in 7 previous years, right? 700 days in 7 immediately previous year, that means he's not fulfilling the criteria and he's not fulfilled the first criteria, he would automatically become a RNOR. Got it? Why Britley's in RO and RNOR? I hope everyone has an answer now. Very good, Swati. I'm so happy to see all your responses. 10 years wala criteria nahi, 730 days wala criteria also is not matching Rohit. Next now, we're talking about Srinath, who is an Indian citizen who resides in Australia. He's permanently residing in Australia and is coming on visit to India. Remember, I told you when he's coming on visit to India, then you have to check whether the income is more than 15 lakhs or less than 15 lakhs. More than 15 lakhs hoga, then you have to check two criteria, less than 15 lakhs hoga, then you have only one criteria of 182 days. But in this question, guys, they are saying 100 days he stays. Irrespective the income, even if it is more than 15 or less than 15, the minimum criteria in the preceding year, in the previous year is 120 days. Suppose the income is more than 15 lakhs, then the criteria is 182 days or more. And if that is not fulfilled, then you have to go to 120 days or more in the previous year and 365 days in the immediate for previous year. But he anyways is residing only 100 days. He will not fulfill 120 days wala criteria. And if we assume, since in the question that he is residing in India and he is coming on visits in India and his income is less than 15 lakhs, then also he's not fulfilling the criteria, right? Because remember, the criteria for an Indian citizen coming on visit to India is this. But dono cases में he will not become, since in the question it is not given whether the Indian income is more than 15 lakhs or not. But anyway, he's not fulfilling the criteria, even if assumed it is more than 15 lakhs or assumed it is less than 15 lakhs. But if I go to the third case where they've written, if Srinath had visited India for 120 days instead of 100 days, what would be your answer? So now you will write, first we will assume that Srinath has a total income of 15 lakhs. If he has a total income of, if he has Indian source income of more than 15 lakhs, then he would be a resident. But since he is becoming a resident as per that 120 days criteria, he will always be deemed to be a resident but not ordinary resident. Read it here. Now, obviously, question में नहीं लिखा हुआ है what is the income, then you have to clearly write either both the scenarios if you have the time. If you don't have the time, is right that we will assume that his income is more than 15 lakhs, then he can become a resident. अब यहाँ पे question में clearly they have written the scenarios. Simple, easy. So this is how you will come to the correct status. Again and again I'm saying, see what is the questions, whether they're talking about Indian citizen, then see what is the purpose. Did he leave India or is he coming on visits to India? If he's coming on visits to India, then see his total income. Then determine the residential status. He's a non-resident, definitely in the second case, but he can be an RNOR. If his income is more than 15 lakhs in the third case, otherwise he would be a non-resident. Okay, so with this, I will leave you with the break hidden, because once you're becoming a resident as per the criteria of 120 days and 365 days, then by default you are an RNOR. That's in the third case, it will determine whether the income is more than 15 lakhs or less than 15 lakhs. If it is less than 15 lakhs, you have to check only 182 days criteria, which he is not fulfilling. If it is more than 15 lakhs, Indian source income is more than 15 lakhs, then you have to check the criteria of 182 days or 120 days and 365 days. Now, since he is becoming a resident as per the 120 days and 365 days criteria, 120 days in the previous year and more than 365 days in the preceding 4 years, then he's becoming a resident. But when a person becomes a resident as per this concept, he's always an RNOR, which I told you. So with this, I will quickly leave you here for a break, freshen up, have something, come back, and if you are ready already, then please do the other illustrations also. Okay? I know, guys, it was very quick and fast. I hope so. Your question is clear. Kiran, I hope your question is clear. Post that, we will start with scope of total income. So in case you want to ask about the residential status of other persons, we can discuss it when you have a query session. Okay? So see you in next 10 minutes. So welcome back everyone. While I share the screen. I hope your residency status of individual is clear. Number of days or Ekanti, you have to remember everything would not be given in the question. So now we'll proceed. Acha, if you want to understand residential status of other person, HUF is simple control and management in India, then 729 days, 730 days wala criteria. Acha, don't get confused, students. Let me just share the screen once. A lot of student gets confused कि मैम आपने 730 days वाला criteria you taught, यहाँ पे तो 729 लिखा है, यहाँ पे this condition is for it being a non-resident. So if a person is a non-resident in 9 in immediately preceding previous year out of 10 previous years, that means he's fulfilling the condition of being a RNOR. Then if he stays in India for equal to or less than 129 days. Remember, as per one concept, remember as per ROR, both the conditions, if not fulfilled, then he would be RNOR. Confused mat hona. Do not write more than 729 days. No. More than 729 days rather is technically right. You just make one statement for all the questions so that technically you don't do it wrong. See, 729 days or more is wrong. More than 729 days is correct. 730 days or more is correct. Okay. So sense is coming like that. Better is to go for 730 days or more. Or remember this, whichever way you feel it is right, remember that these conditions are given for becoming RNOR. We did the conditions for becoming ROR. Language is just done like, instead of this, it's done like this, but meaning is the same. Okay. And final result would be the same. But all I'm trying to say, do not confuse yourself by remembering or practicing two different types of statement. Chart explanation in exam not recommended. Bullet points definitely is recommended, and make sure that your conclusion is very pretty much clear. That does not mean I'm saying write it in an extra font size. All I'm trying to say, you can underline it if you have time. If you, whatever residential status you have determined, try to underline it or try it to be the last concluding line. So that so that the paper checker does not have to see where is the answer, where is the answer. And this is not only for residential status or income tax. This practice you should follow for all your exams. Okay, now we quickly move to scope of total income. I hope the screen is visible. Yeah. See, once you determine the residential status correctly, now the thing is to determine the total income correctly. And total income को determine करने के लिए first you have to see. Obviously, you have to divide your income under various heads, but first you have to see what type of income would be taxed in India. So, for a person who is a ROR, RNOR, and non-resident, the scopes are different. If you talk about companies, if you talk about firms, if you talk about LLPs, anyone who is just either classified as resident and non-resident, then the scope of income would be like resident for these things and non-resident for this. Okay. Now, what is the scope, ma'am? So, for a person who's an ROR, any income which he accrues or earn during the year from any source would be taxable under the Indian income tax. So, if I am an ROR, I'm sitting abroad, I'm earning rental income from a property abroad, taxed in India. I'm an ROR, I am trading in New York Stock Exchange, getting capital gain income, tax in India. basically whatever I'm earning from 1st April 2023 to 31st March 2024 for the previous year 23-24 would be taxed in India. Ma'am, double taxation ho jayega. USA would also take the tax. Then what will happen? See, then we have certain treaties, we have certain agreements with countries to determine what should be followed, or then we have a foreign tax credit policy. But later stage. That is all technical, that all you will study when you are there in final. Right now, you have to focus on Indian income tax laws, and you have to remember that global income taxable during the year. During the year, okay? So if it is received or deemed to received in India, taxable for all, irrespective of the residential status. If it is accrued or deemed to accrue in India, taxable for all. And received or deemed to be received, मतलब या तो मिला हो या तो माना गया है कि मिला है. That is, either it is assumed that it is received, even if it is not received in your direct account, but it is deemed to be received, just like interest on PF for more than 9.5%. Ma'am, received in India, again, यहाँ पे question comes and a question is technically checked. Received means first time when did you receive? Carefully listen to me. I received a particular income from Dubai in my Dubai account, and then I transferred it to my Indian account. This is not called received in India. This is not called received in India. This is called remitted in India, remitted to India. Pehli bari, when did I receive the income? At the first instance in my Dubai account. So that is the account in which it was received. Ultimately, transferring it to an Indian account does not make it an Indian received income. When did you got a right of that income? Where did you got the right of it? As in, right in the sense, where did it got credit? When did it come in your hand? Where did it come to your hand? Okay. So this income particularly will only be taxed for ROR, not for RNOR and NR. This has to be a very important clarity, and generally a question comes on this. Okay. Accrued or rising or deemed to be accrued in India, then it has to be taxed in India. Basically, sourced in India. Deemed to accrue, there are a lot of concepts in Section 9, and it is very important. Section 9, all in all, is very important for everyone. But accrued means source India. Like if I'm talking about house property, the properties in India, that is called accrued in India. Even if it is received outside India, does not matter. Even if it is received in foreign currency, does not matter. Even if it is received at a later stage, if you're following accrual basic accounting, you will pay tax about it in India. For example, I was telling you about I get rent from a property in India, accrued in India, taxable for all. I get what should I say? I may get interest from FDs in India, taxable for all. Why? Because the source is in India, the asset is in India. Third aspect is for income accruing or arising outside India. That has to be taxed, I told you, for ROR, even if it is received in India, not received in India, transferred to India, not transferred to India. Any income which is accrued during the previous year has to be taxed in India. But for non-resident, it will not be taxed. So that's why people always aim to strive to be a non-resident when they have income from multiple sources across the globe, because they want to pay tax only on Indian income, not on their entire income. So they very strategically plan their stays. But for an RNOR, there is a small variation. For an RNOR, there is a small variation. Income accruing outside India would not be taxed until received in India. Suppose an income is accrued outside India, received in India, then definitely it's falling under this criteria. Definitely it is falling under this first criteria. Then it could have to be taxed in non-resident also. But suppose income is accrued outside India, is received outside India also, would be taxed for ROR. Would be taxed for ROR definitely. But for an RNOR, it will only be taxed if it will only be taxed if income is derived from a business controlled in or a profession set up in India. Income is derived from a business controlled in India or for a profession set up in India. Suppose I have an income, I am a manufacturer of Chinese product. I do not get that product in India. I produce it in China. I sell it in Japan. Okay? Now accruing is outside India. Carefully listen, everyone. Accruing is also outside India and receiving is also in India. Okay? I'm getting money in yen. Now, It would not be taxed for non-resident, definitely. It would be taxed for resident, definitely, because accrued from any source. But suppose I am in RNOR, I'm sitting in India and controlling that business. I'm sitting in India and controlling that business. All the decisions are happening from India. All the board meetings are happening for India. From the main child is here in India. I'm controlling it from India. Then that business income, which is for the manufacturing happening in China, selling in Japan, would be taxed in India because the business is controlled in India. The business is controlled in India. Got it? This example gives a clarity on what has to be taxed and what does not have to be taxed. Scope of total income में कोई confusion? Does anyone has a question in scope of total income? Which exception, Varun? I would not be able to explain all this exception again. Please explain which exception. Tushar, I did not discuss residency status of company and HUF because they are comparatively easier than individual. If you will ask me, I'll do it because they are very simple. In case you want it, I'll do it. We can take that in the interactive session also. No, Anup, here you're wrong. RNOR के लिए global income नहीं होती. Only for resident and ordinary resident. For them, the global is taxable in India, whether received in India or not. For non-resident, global income is not taxed until it is received in India. And for RNOR, also the same case. But I give an example. If the business is controlled from India, even if it is accruing outside India, even if it is received outside India, then for only a business, I'm not talking about other things, for only that business and profession, that income would be deemed to be, that income would be taxable in the hands of RNOR. That income would be taxable in the hands of RNOR. Priyanka, any income received or accrued during the year for an ROR is taxable in India. Suppose I have a land in Honolulu also, I'm earning income from that, it is taxable in India. Accruing outside India, receiving outside India, then also taxed in India. If an income is received in India but is accrued outside India, it is taxed for everyone. And by receiving, I'm again and again saying receiving as the first time receiving, not remitting. First, you received in your any other account outside India, and then remitting, that is not called received in India. Please remember, you will be checked on this point. Now, if based on this, we have to do one question quickly. Swati, tax on remittances, FEMA may if you're covered or not. But if you're just remitting and it is accruing outside India, receiving outside India, not taxable for RNOR and NR, only taxable for ROR. And if it is a case of business control in India, taxable for RNOR also. So there is one full-fledged question in your module only, which will make it more clear. Okay, so I'm not picking up the entire question. This is your illustration. Okay, so this is your illustration 8. You have to determine it for a person who is of the age of 35 years, being his ROR, RNOR, and NR. So to determine the residency status, sorry, I am not picking up the entire question. I'm just picking up the scenarios. You will tell me whether that person, what would be the treatment of this income, whether it would be taxable for all, not taxable, how much taxable. Okay, I'm just marking the scenarios. And D. Okay. Tell me the residential status. First, about dividend from a British company received in London. Companies outside India received in London. Accrued outside India, received outside India. Taxable only in the case of ROR. Very good. Profit from a business in Delhi but managed entirely from London. Taxable for B situation. Taxable for all. Yes or no? Yes, because it is from a business in Delhi. If it would have been an ulta case, profit from a business in London, but it's controlled or managed from Delhi, then RNOR and ROR. Okay. C case, income from house property in London, deposited in a bank at London, brought to India. Ab batao. And this is very interesting. Carefully tell about this. Accruing outside India. Very good, very good. Everyone is answering. I'm so happy. Remittance not taxable, ऐसे नहीं लिखोगे प्रियंका. You will write accruing outside India, receiving outside India, only taxable for ROR. Very good, Gayatri. Very good, Ritika. Sushmita. Superb. Swati. Very good. And D, income from business in Chennai, 50% is received in India. Yes, taxable for all because the business is in Chennai. Now, quickly go through the illustration. If you have any specific point which I should cover, I would be very happy to. इसमें से कुछ एस्पेक्ट है जो टैक्सेबिलिटी एस्पेक्ट पे कि whether it would be taxable or not, as in because gifts received on wedding are not taxable. That does not mean it is not out of the scope of total income. It's out of the scope of taxation once, even if it is covered in the total income. कोई specific case you want to discuss, ma'am? Why this? Yes, please write it in the question part. Otherwise, you can park it for later, where you can have an interactive session. The gift by default of income from other sources, when you will study the provision of section 56, it is not taxable. That's why it is not getting taxed. Perfect. सबको clear? Anyone has any doubt? Penalty, interest, fee for technical services is taxable. NLT, I think penalty ni royalty ka you were asking. Yes. Sixth point, Swati, 1 second. Okay, sixth point. Does anyone want to attempt? This is interesting. Carefully. Income earned from business in Germany, which is controlled in Delhi, 40,000 is received in India. This is very good point. Very good. Satya has given absolutely right answer. 70,000 for ROR and RNOR. Very good, Satya. 40,000 for NR. Management word use नहीं करना प्रियंका. Controlled word use करना है. Control and management you use for HUF, for AOPs, LLPs and all. Okay. Very good. See, Priyanka, this is when you will learn what it is technically going wrong. Because most of the problem with a student is that we understand the concept, but we don't know how to present that and write that concept where we lag, especially when it is theory papers or papers like law, audit, or tax laws papers, whether it's GST or income tax, because we know what the concept is, but we are unable to draft it rightly. Okay? Okay, so coming to point 6, which was of my friend Swati. See, income from business in Germany, which is controlled in Delhi, 40,000 received in India. Source is outside, but controlled from Delhi. Received is also Delhi, but only a particular amount. So first of all, ROR का पूरा कर देंगे. ROR के लिए it is 70,000. Non-resident के लिए accrued outside India, received outside India. Accrued outside India, received a percentage in India. Only the percentage which is received in India. I am now coming to RNOR. Accrued outside India, received certain amount outside India and India, but it is controlled from India, so entire amount would be taxable. Okay? Very good, Ritika. Ritika is asking, is direct tax theory concept content is not asked, only problems are asked, which cover all aspects. So mostly now, since the institute is working towards making you analyze the concepts and seeing how technically right you are rather than mugging up the concepts. So the approach is definitely more of the technical questions or case studies based question asked. One or two direct questions can be asked where they can ask, write the conditions about or write about undisclosed source of incomes. That type of question can ask, but otherwise it would be more on problem based. But that being said, the problem has to be, since it's a law, sort of direct tax are laws, you have to carefully analyze and write the provisions correctly. First of all, for attempting any question which is problem based, write what the provision says, write what the question is asking, write what is your conclusion finally, and how the provision and the question is related to. Kishan, I'm trying to give tips as much as possible. Definitely, if the institute allows, I'll take it. क्वेश्चन को पूरा नहीं लिखना, क्वेश्चन को राइट कि व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट इन द क्वेश्चन, the provision is this, the problem statement is this, the provision and the problem statement combined makes this, and this is the final conclusion. Okay, agriculture income, big question here. See, agriculture income is not taxable, so where is the confusion? He did not tax it because it is exempt. यहाँ पे कुछ कुछ केस वैसे ही, that's what I'm saying guys, कुछ कुछ case even if it is in the scope but it is not exempt because of the Indian tax laws, they made it out. Okay, no? Point 14 I think is left. 14 को काउंट करना पड़ेगा. 1 second, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14. Income from agricultural land in Nepal, right? Received there and then brought to India. accrued outside India, received outside India, not taxable for ROR and RNOR, but not taxable for RNOR and non-resident, but taxable for ROR. Agriculture income का exemption खाली is on the land, which is this in India. I'll try to do that. Okay. Now, quickly, I have almost 10 minutes before we go to the live interactive session. Let me just quickly take you to the final aspect, which is the income concept deemed to accrue or arise in India. Now, Section 9 students, pata hai, honestly, from practical standpoint and from your standpoint of case laws in real life is very complex because it is not simple as appears because people are not just having income from India and having from multiple sources. People are settled abroad since they're earning income from multiple sources. They have developed it in a way that you might not get to know. So, income deemed to accrue or rise in India is a very important aspect. And let me tell you, once you go to the final level, it is all the more important. But here at your level, they have tried to simplify it to a lot of extent. And you have to remember Section 9, subsection 1 has clauses from 1 to 8, which tells that even if it prima facie appears from a non-resident perspective, that income is accruing outside India, but still it would be deemed to accrue in India. Because for resident, anyway, it is always taxable, whether accrued or not in India, right? But from the perspective of non-resident, prima facie, it can happen that that you think that an income is accruing outside India, but if it is covered under the provision of Section 9, it would be deemed to accrue or arise in India. That means it would be taxable in India. What are these clauses from Section 9, subsection 1? First is income. I hope everyone can see the screen, right? I've shared it. So I'll quickly take you through. So first is income accruing or arising outside India, even if it is accruing outside India, or is it arising from outside India, but is directly or indirectly from a business connection in India. Directly or indirectly from a business connection in India. Business connection को simplify भी मैं समझो that there is someone who is in India who is working on my behalf. I am a non-resident sitting outside India, but there is a pure agent for me in India, pure agent for me in India who is securing order for me, maintaining inventory for me, entering into contracts for me. All of these things he's habitually doing, not only for all, but just for me exclusively. Then he's my business connection. So any income which is coming from that business connection would be income deemed to accrue in India. That means even if I'm sitting abroad, I'm not coming to India, but he is securing orders, working into contracts, managing inventory, all of these things, if he's doing, or a person or any other uh, entity is doing, that means I have a connection in India who is doing a business on my behalf, like a pure agent. So if any income coming from them would be income accruing in India. Okay, this is how you can understand in a layman part. Or income from any property, asset, or source of income is in India, the income would be accrued in India. Like income from house property would be treated as house income from property in India would be treated as income from India. Similarly, income from suppose a dividends of a company in India would be treated as income accrued in India. Transfer of capital assets situated in India. No matter, suppose a deal is happening between a transfer between two non-residents, and that too, the agreement is happening, suppose in USA. But if the capital asset is situated in India, even if it appears that a person did not come to India to transfer it, though technically it cannot be, even if the agreement happened outside India, even if you received money outside India in US dollars for this property, still it would be told that the income is accrued in India because the capital asset was situated in India. Hence, any profit or gain from it would be taxable as income deemed to accrue in India. Okay. Then salaries earned for services rendered in India. Whenever the services are rendered in India, even if you are from a foreign company, even if you are getting your money in or your salary in your US account in US dollars, even if your employer is outside India, but if you are rendering services in India, if you are rendering services in India, that means a project is in India or any other thing is in India, you came in India as a diplomat or anything, it prima facie it is taxable. See, once it is deemed to accrue in India, then you have to see whether it's covered under certain exemption under Section 10, whether there are certain criteria of its taxability under different heads. That is a different thing. But whether it would be taxable as deemed to accrue in India, yes or no, the answer is yes. Now, what the provisions or what the exception says, that you have to see. But prima facie, it is taxable in India. Salary payable by the government to Indian citizens for services rendered outside India. Now, this is very interesting. Uh, इसमें remember the example of a diplomat. Diplomat क्या होते हैं? Embassies, you know, embassies होती है. So embassies, like we have in India embassies of different countries. Similarly, in different countries we have embassies of India, right? So a person who is working in that embassy is generally getting paid by the government of India. वहाँ का country is not paying them. The government of India is paying them for working in Indian embassy abroad. So if the salary is paid by the government to Indian citizen who is working abroad, even if वो services का है बाहर, the services are बाहर, the services are outside India, but it would be deemed to accrue in India. Why? Because the payment is made by an employer who is the government. If the payment would have been made by a non-government employer, that would not be covered under clause 3. I'm talking about payment when made by government, payment when made by the government. So the employer should be the government and services are rendered abroad and you are an Indian citizen. All three conditions fulfilled will make the income deemed to accrue or arise in India. Yes, there are exceptions covered, like allowances would not be taxable, etc. But income would be deemed to accrue in India. Then you have to see what are the exemptions in relation to it. Dividend paid by Indian company outside India. Now, suppose Mr. Joy is a person who has Reliance shares, who has shares of Reliance. He's getting the dividend of that in his US account. And he purchased the shares of Reliance also through his foreign exchange. But he cannot say that I am receiving dividend in my US account, I am sitting in US. But if it's an Indian company dividend, it would always be taxable. It would always be taxable irrespective of where you have received it. So it is again deemed to accrue in arise in India. First 4 points में कोई doubt है? Does anyone has doubt in the first 4 points? Abhi, we are not going into details because the revision part. In the next interactive session of next half an hour, koi bhi point you have to understand again. Any illustration you want me to do, any other aspect you want me to cover, please feel free to ask. And again, I'm saying do not take this chapter lightly. Thank you, Kushroy. Illustration 5.3 Kiran. And anyone whose questions are left regarding illustrations, please feel free to ask it during the interactive session. So all the videos are there on the app, I believe, and are uploaded not only for the respective chapter, but I think all the videos are uploaded. This again, you can ask in the interactive class. So you've covered these all points in detail in the interactive class. Next aspects of income deemed to accrue or arise in India comes for interest, royalty, and fees for technical services. थोड़ा सा छोटा कर देते हैं. I hope it is visible. Yeah. किसी की any illustration related query, please try to take it after 5 minutes in the practice session. Okay. Next part from section 9, subsection 1, clause 5, 6, 7, and 8 talks about interest, royalty, fees, and 8 talks about a very beautiful concept called gift. So for interest, royalty, and fees, first you have to understand what is royalty, what is fee for technical services. Uh, Royalty generally is a lump sum for any work, literature, art, scientific work, anything, any formula, any invention. It can be a lump sum payment, it can be a periodic payment. It is taxable, yes or no, we'll see. Fee for technical services generally mean paying technical services for any managerial or consultancy work or any technical work which is basically done by someone who has expertise in it. Okay, in general sense. Now, whether it would be taxable in the hands of the person who is receiving or accruing it has to be seen by the by from the perspective that who is the payer, who is paying that income. इंटरेस्ट किस कौन पे कर रहा है, रॉयल्टी कौन पे कर रहा है, फी फॉर टेक्निकल सर्विस कौन पे कर रहा है. नाउ व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय दैट? सपोज यू आर द नॉन रेजिडेंट, ठीक है, यू आर द नॉन रेजिडेंट हु इज रिसीविंग इंटरेस्ट, रॉयल्टी और फी फॉर टेक्निकल सर्विस. We have to see whether it is taxable in your hand or not. So for that, we have to see who is the person making payment in India. Who is the person making payment in India? So first I'll cover for royalty and fee for technical services. So the royalty and fee for technical services is paid by a person resident in India or a person who is a non-resident or a person who is a government. See, if the royalty, if the fee for technical service is paid by a person who is the government. So government of India is paying you royalty, fee for technical services or interest. It will always be taxable in India. It will always be taxable in India. When a resident person is paying you that interest, when a resident person is paying you that interest, royalty, fee for technical services, it is again always be taxable in India until and unless it is used for earning any income outside India. Until and unless it is used for earning any income outside India or used for any business or profession outside India. Then, when a non-resident is paying interest, royalty, fee for technical services, it would only be taxable. It would only be taxable. Interest would only be taxable if it is used for the purpose of business or profession in India. Royalty and fee for technical services would only be taxable if that payment is made for any purpose of business or profession or for earning any income in India. So I can say it like that. Suppose a non-resident is paying another non-resident an interest. Okay? A non-resident is paying another non-resident an interest. Now we have to see whether this non-resident who has earned interest, whether that income is deemed to accrue or arise in India or not. It would be deemed to accrue or arise in India only if this person who is paying the interest. Obviously, this person is paying the interest. That means he would have borrowed the money. That means he would have borrowed the money. So this person who have borrowed the money is using that money for earning any business income in India. If he has used that money to earn any other income in India, then this interest would not be taxable in the hands of non-resident. Then it would not be deemed to accrue in India. Then it would not be deemed to accrue in India. Please understand, this is a very important and technical point. When a person who's paying whenever there is interest, royalty, fee for technical services, you have to be attentive to see who is the payer. Who is the payer? If the payer is government, then it is always deemed to accrue or arise in India, even if you are earning it in outside account, even if you're paying rendering services from outside India, but it would be deemed to accrue or arise in India if it is paid by government. If it is paid by non-resident, if it is paid by non-resident, then interest only would be taxable when it is used, when the money which is borrowed is used for the purpose of carrying on business or profession. But royalty and fee would always be taxable when the payment is made for a service which would ultimately be used for business or profession or for making or earning any source of income in India. Okay. In this case of interest, which I was telling, since he used that business for suppose making FD in India, this interest would not be taxable in the hands of other non-resident. Let's take it with an example of A and B. Suppose A, one non-resident, is paying interest to B, another non-resident. Interest is also in US dollar, everything is in US dollar. But A had used this money, which he borrowed from B, to purchase shares in India. So the interest which he is paying would not be taxable in the hands of B as income deemed to accrue in India. If it is received in India, that is differently, but it would not be considered as income deemed to accrue in India. But suppose A had borrowed this money for the purpose of business or profession in India, it would have been taxable. It would have been taxable in the hands of B. Why? Because the money was borrowed and used for the purpose of business and profession in India. Got it? Now let's talk about fee and royalty. Royalty and fee में बस difference ये है interest से that when a non-resident is paying royalty or fee for technical services to another non-resident, then it would be taxed in India only if the purpose for which the royalty and this FTS was given was either used for a business in India or for earning any income in India. By business, I also include profession or for earning any income in India. Interest would be taxed in the hands of non-resident when paid by another non-resident only when it is used for the purpose of business and profession. But royalty and fee for technical services would be taxed when paid by another non-resident to another non-resident when it is used for any purpose in India, for earning any purpose of income in India. और resident के केस में क्या है, when the payer is a resident, then it should be used strictly for India, should not be utilized for any purpose of business or profession outside India. Or any purpose outside India or for any business or profession outside India. And the last part, that is income deemed to accrue or arise in India, is basically when a resident person, is paying any income is paying any sum rather in money for more than 50,000 to any RNOR, to any foreign company, to any basically all this person, then in that case, it would be considered as income deemed to accrue or arise in India. Now you will see, ma'am, why so? So this concept is very new in the sense this was recently introduced a couple of years back. I go abroad, okay? I am a resident in India. I go abroad to suppose I have a son there, okay? And I am paying him son nahi. Suppose karo I have a friend there, okay? Who is an RNOR or he's a non-resident. And I'm paying him 1 lakh in cash. Okay. Now the question comes, who is receiving that cash? 1 lakh, a person who is outside India. So a lot of times what used to happen, people used to deal in cash transaction outside India and they used to show it as gift, or they used to show that this is accrued outside India, a person is receiving it outside India, you cannot tax it. You cannot tax it. But now they have specifically covered it through income deemed to accrue or arise in India, that when any non-resident RNOR or a foreign company is receiving a sort of gift, a gift as in a cash gift because they are not paying anything in return from a resident person for a value of more than 50,000, then that money would be income deemed to accrue in India and would be taxable. There you cannot say that it was accrued outside India because the person was receiving it outside India and the person who was getting it was actually outside India and the gift happened outside India. No, it would be by default income deemed to accrue in India. Okay. So with this, we complete the concept of residential status. If you have any doubts, we can ask. I request the tech team to grant everyone the speaking rights and like earlier classes, please raise your hand and ask. The tech team, is the rights granted? Tech team, Ajit sir, is the rights for speaking granted? Yeah, Gayatri.
Ma'am, can you explain that page number 2.29, that box? Ma'am?
1 second. I have few questions in the box also. Page number
2.29, ma'am.
in Saransh book or
Book, ma'am. Book, ma'am.
study material?
Yes, ma'am.
2.29. Just 1 second. This box?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Income deemed to accrue or arise in India to a non-resident by way of interest royalty to be taxed irrespective of the territorial nexus. So see, if interest, royalty fee for technical services is getting taxed as per the concepts which is studied, paid by government, paid by resident, and paid by non-resident, and for the purpose, if it is clear, then whether or not that person in whose hand the income is getting taxed definitely would be a non-resident, because ROR के लिए तो generally it is taxed, it would be a non-resident. The territorial nexus, that is whether he was in India when the services were rendered or not, whether he has any place of business in India or not, whether he has any residence in India, does not matter. Once they are fulfilling the criteria as per section 9, subsection 1, clause 5, 6, and 7, it has to be taxed. Irrespective where that non-resident is, irrespective from where he's rendering the services, does not make it that missing of territorial nexus means territorial connection does not make it as income not deemed to accrue or arise in India. This is what is written. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, to
Ma'am,
please explain. Yeah, yes, Priyanka.
ma'am, page 2.8. Please
हाँ,
explain the only Indian citizen can be deemed resident to, और उसका पूरा 2 points है उसमें.
1 second. Two point eight. कौन
Yes,
सा
ma'am.
वाला?
Ma'am,
The box?
yes, ma'am. Box में है only Indian citizen.
So I told you, see, deemed resident के case exceptions में हमने लिखा था, एक था Indian citizen and person of Indian origin coming on visits to India. ठीक है? Then
Yes,
second
ma'am.
case था Indian citizen leaving either as a crew member or leaving India for purpose of employment during the previous year. And third था deemed residents का, where they have clearly written that deemed resident one by one. And if your query is answered, please mute yourself. Okay? Priyanka, other than Priyanka, please mute everyone. And third point was deemed resident, that Indian citizen would be considered as deemed resident if he's not a resident of any other country, or if he's not taxable or liable to tax in any other country because of his domicile, etc. So they are saying in this box that this concept of deemed residence is only applicable to Indian citizen. Person of Indian origin to this concept is not applicable. And secondly, the stay is not necessary, because deemed resident is a concept when you're not becoming resident in any of the clauses, and also you're not liable to pay taxes in any of the country. So here no one can say that we did not even come to India, then why we are deemed resident. Okay, so stay does not matter. And first point is that it is only for Indian citizen, not for person of Indian origin. Okay. Okay, Priyanka.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, Naresh.
Ma'am, can you please explain the clarification page number 2.1?
Naresh, your voice is not clear.
Ma'am, can you please explain the clarification in page number 2.16?
2.16. Oh, clarification, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That clarification regarding liable to income tax in India, that box, ma'am.
Okay. So basically, guys, for understanding clarification, one should know what is NRE account and what is NRO account. So NRE account, which is non-resident external account, and one is non-resident ordinary account. Both these accounts are operated under the FEMA laws and are generally opened by non-resident. For NRE account, they parked their foreign incomes in the NR account, which are not accrued in India. And NRO account is just like a savings account for a non-resident, where you can put in your Indian source income. So by default, any income which is there in an NRE account is not taxable, is not taxable. As simple as that. This you have to remember. Otherwise, this clarification says that a person was receiving a salary by a non-resident for services rendered outside India. In any which way, in an NRE account, generally whatever is getting credit for a non-resident is not taxable. Just remember that.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chat box pay, ma'am, for salary earned for services rendered in India and paid for foreign company, then it is income deemed to accrue in India. Yes or no? Services are rendered in India. Employer foreigner here. Project is employer is foreigner. Even if I'm receiving in US account, but the services are rendered in India, it would be taxable in India. See, Kishan, as safely I can tell about this answer is, first, take your study material as Bible, take whatever mock test papers, whatever RTPs, everything which the institute is releasing as on priority. Do as many questions from different types of books you have. It will definitely help you and boost your confidence. Okay.
मैम
Yes, Kritika.
मैम एक है इनकम डीम्ड टू बी रिसीव्ड इन इंडिया अंडर सेक्शन 7 पेज नंबर
हाँ
2.19
हाँ
उसमें मैम ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट है 12% पीएफ एंड 9.5% इंटरेस्ट
इंटरेस्ट
का
का
ये हमें कैसे पता चलेगा कि ये कितना पेमेंट हुआ है और कितना हम इसका टैक्सेबल करेंगे
I'll tell you. This is on which page?
2.19
ये है ना?
यस मैम ये बॉक्स वाले तीनों
हाँ।
पॉइंट्स
Okay, so Kritika, generally see income deemed to be received in India मतलब आपको actually you have not received, but it would be assumed that you have received it. Now these three scenarios are mostly related to the salary calculation, salary aspect. Salary may, if you remember, when a employer is making payment to an RPF account as a contribution, it is not taxable to the extent of 12% of salary, right? If you
ओके
remember,
मैम
this is of salary concept. If you remember, any employer making a contribution to a recognized provident fund of an employee is not taxable up to 12% of salary. So what if he makes a contribution of more than 12%? Suppose the employer has made a contribution of 15% of salary. Now that 3% is taxable in the hands of employer. The employer cannot say that I did not receive, because actually he's not receiving it. It is getting credited to the account of the provident fund, right? To the account of the provident fund. So this 3%, which is excess, would be considered to be income deemed to receive in India. That's why salary may, whenever a provident fund may contribution is more than 12%, you make it as taxable salary.
मैम ये वाले तीनों कॉन्सेप्ट एम्बेसी और इंडियन डिप्लोमेट वाले में अप्लाई होते हैं ना
नहीं. Who said that? ये कॉन्सेप्ट जनरली सैलरी कैलकुलेशन में अप्लाई होते हैं. देखो, आई एम एन एम्प्लॉय, थिंक योर सेल्फ एज एन एम्प्लॉय. ठीक है, आई जनरली
ओके मैम
the contribution which the employer makes to my provident fund, I am not getting it in my account, it is getting credited in a provident fund account which is in my name, definitely. But वो मुझे मिल नहीं रहा, I am not getting it to खर्च, I am not receiving it, right? It is there in the provident fund account. So if he's making a contribution of 10%, 9%, whatever salary percentage contribution he's making, it is not taxable in my hand, because it's getting accumulated. And if it is all the conditions are fulfilled, the withdrawal also would not be taxable. Now they say if the employer is making a contribution of more than 12% during the year, more than 12% during the year, even if you're not receiving it, but we will deem it to be accrued, deem it to be received in your hand, and we will tax it. This is the
Okay.
reason when you will study salary and when you will study कि RPF में any contribution comes, it is not taxed up to the extent of 12% of the salary, but more than 12% is taxed. Why? Because it is income deemed to be received in India. Similar concept goes for interest and similar concept goes for the NPS. NPS में basically anything given to you is taxable. NPS में भी same होता है. NPS में भी it's a account which is maintained where employer makes the contribution. And if the employer is making the contribution, there, even if you are not receiving it, it would be deemed to be received as salary.
Okay, ma'am.
सारी salary से related concept में clarity आएगा.
ठीक है मैम.
Ritika has a doubt.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. No. Flight attendant is not crew member. Crew member is of Indian bound ship, which is given. Ritika, teaching is a profession when you are talking about from a perspective of not an employee. But if I'm a teacher and I'm employed with BOS, suppose, then I'm an employee there. But if I'm working as a freelancer, then the income would be taxed as income from profession. A profession, if it's in a contract of service with the employer, would become the income would receive would be salary. Illustration 1, page number 2.7. Yash is asking why assumption is not written. One second. Illustration 1 क्या है? See, Anand here, Yash, या Anand का question है ना ये? 1 second. Indian citizen and a member of crew of Singapore Indian ship. So crew member के लिए 15 lakhs वाला तो condition था ही नहीं. Crew member और उसके लिए only it was that if a person is an Indian citizen who leaves India as a crew member or it leaves India for the purpose of employment during the year, then the condition is 182 days or more for residential status. 15 lakhs वाला तो confusion ही नहीं है यहाँ पे. Okay. So, Janya, I believe all the classes are live. Ajit sir, can you please confirm? I hope all the classes are live of taxes.
Which classes they are asking, Vidima?
So Janya in the chat box is writing, is all classes of tax are live because today in the schedule they have not confirmed whether it is live or recording link I've opened live. Then I came to know that class is taken by you in live. All the recorded classes are live, ma'am.
No. See, whatever be schedule will be uploaded for taxes or other subjects, all classes will be live. But apart from these, since these sessions are for your doubt clearing sessions, right, and taking some queries and all, you are supposed to view your recorded sessions as well, right? So whatever be the schedule now will be uploaded, all classes will be live only. Because earlier there were some confusion, students were getting confused how to manage both classes. Now seeing your concerns, we have now scheduled the classes accordingly. We have now on Friday, you are having a class on salaries on Friday. So you are having these 3-4 days for viewing those recorded sessions and practice the salary chapter from your study material, your illustrations, questions given there, right? Then you come and attend the salary classes. One class is allotted for salaries for your doubt, right?
Perfect. I hope this answers your question. So, Gayatri, income from agriculture land in Nepal is taxable. Yeah, because agricultural income is when we talk about agricultural income, Gayatri, we only talk about agricultural income from land situated in India. If the land is situated outside India, it is always taxable. And if it is from income from agriculture in Nepal and nothing is written about receiving in India, you will assume it is received outside India and then you will make it taxable only in case of ROR because it is accrued outside India and received outside India. And any other doubt which is left? Let me see the other portal also. Sorry. Illustration 5.C, page 2.18. Okay. Kiran. So Kiran, this is your doubt, illustration 5.C. 1 second. So, rent from property in London deposited in a bank in London, later on remitted to India through approved banking channels. We have to see whether it is taxable and in what is the scope of this particular income. This is illustration 5. One of your friend has asked this question. Okay, so properties in London, the source is in London, it is deposited in London, it is received in London. Only that it is remitted remitted to India through a banking channel. Remember when we were discussing about received in India, I told you the received in India means when, as an assessee, what is the first instance where did you actually receive? Where did you actually receive? Remittance is not called received in India, or later remittance is not called received in India. When was the actual income came in your hand? When or where it did come? So in this case, it is received in London. So definitely it would not be taxable in the hands of non-resident. Why? It is accrued outside India, it is received outside India. Now coming to RNOR, again it would not be taxable because accrued outside India, received outside India, and here we're not talking about the business. But for ROR, the entire global incomes are taxable. That is why this 75,000 would be taxable in the hands of ROR. Now, since the question it's not written, see, this is very important. It's not written the word computed. See, when it is written computed, it means that whatever amount should be taxable in India, that is given to you, the amount also. But if it is not written computed, then by default, you place at 75,000 and then give at least 30% standard deduction, which by default is given for all rental income. And that is why this answer as 50,500 is coming. Okay. And even the note is given for that. If you do not want to write 52,500, then say we assume that this is the amount which is computed. But better to write it 52,500. For becoming an AIR, you need to write both the groups in one go. You need to clear both the groups in one go. One go as in both together. It's an interesting question. Any other doubt? Yes, you can watch the recorded videos. There is no change, and rather, in a very quick speed, we discussed almost entire points for individuals, also scope of income, also section 9 also. So you can refer to this video too. Any other point of anyone has left?
Yes, you can unmute yourself and ask your
Yeah.
doubt.
Yes, yes.
मैम मुझे एक इलिस्ट्रेशन 1 में डाउट है.
Anand wala illustration?
यस.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, speak your doubt. Meanwhile, I'll go to the illustration.
मैम उसमें एक्सेप्शन नहीं लगेगा क्योंकि इनकम तो क्लैरिफाई ही नहीं किया है ना कि 15 लाख के ऊपर है या 15 लाख के नीचे है, तो उसमें एक्सेप्शन नहीं लगेगा 120 डेज और मोर का.
So Yash, when we were discussing the conditions for residential status, and I told you exception may when we're talking about Indian citizens whose income who leaves India as a member of crew member, or who leaves India during the financial year for the purpose of employment outside India, there is only one condition you have to check, whether that person is in India for 182 days or more for him to become resident. 15 lakhs income or not does not matter for them. 15 lakhs income wala criteria matters either when you're talking about deemed resident or when you're talking about Indian citizen and person of Indian origin who are coming on visit to India. Otherwise, when I'm talking about crew members or or any person who's leaving India for the purpose of employment during the previous year, you just have to check 182 days or more wala condition. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, but in the previous recordings of May batch, you have also given additional condition of 365 days to be also satisfied, ma'am, in the video.
Automatically वो मतलब एक ही निकलता है, because अगर 182 days satisfy हो गया तो वो general rule से the person becomes the resident.
So you have to satisfy for both the conditions,
182 days, for 182 days wala condition.
not the 365 days, ma'am.
365 days will come when it is with 120 days wala condition or 60 days wala condition as per general rule. Okay?
Okay.
If technical fees paid by a non-resident to a non-resident for a business idea set up in India, but they didn't set up the business afterwards. See, afterwards, again, hypothetical, usme people, they will see how much was used or not. Basically, if you're paying technical fees for the purpose of setting up business in India, or the fees is used for any purpose sort of business or profession in India by a non-resident to another non-resident, it would be taxable in India. Any other doubt? In case you have written your query earlier and I've missed it, you can retype it so that it is appeared. Those scrolling, if anything is left, you can let me know. Or you can interact. 2.5 page point 2. Then this is the exception which we have already covered for 2.5 page point 2 multiple times. Please watch the recording earlier. I think you joined the class late. Will agricultural income be taxable for non-resident because the source and it is accrued in India, or is it taxable for all? See, agricultural income which is from a land in India or from the agricultural activities done or conducted on an activity agricultural activities conducted on a land in India would not be taxable by the provisions of Section 10, by the provisions of Section 10 Clause 1. But if an agricultural land is outside India, it would be taxable. If received in India, it would be taxable for all. If not received in India, then as per accrued outside India, if accrued outside India and received outside India, then only for ROR. Okay. Santan, received मतलब आपको मिला कैसे? Accrue means where is the source? And deemed to accrue is Section 9, the provision which we discussed. Ma'am, shall we wrap up the session there?
Yeah, I think the students do not have the queries now. We can wrap up. Now, students, please prepare and do review your salary chapter recordings, right, for the next session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. You were great audience. See you in the next class pretty soon. All the best. Thank you. And the notes, the practice questions would be uploaded for it also. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Bye.